Alright everybody, today we are going to take a look at making an effect by Daniel Sintala on Twitter. It's an effect that he made in Unity, and we're going to try and recreate it in Blender today, because I got into a conversation with someone on Instagram as to whether you could recreate it, and I was like, it's pretty simple to recreate, but let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. So most of it's pretty simple, just some material work with a couple procedural textures. And then the biggest thing that makes it a little bit tricky is actually doing the edge detection, because there's a couple different ways you can do it in Blender, but some of them are a bit odd, and it can be a little tricky to get working. All right, so again, go ahead and check out Daniel Sintella. I'm going to link his Twitter in the description. All right, and let's hop right into Blender. Alrighty, so let's look real quick at the effect we're going to create. So you can see it's got the distortion, it's got the things moving around. It's a little bit laggy here, whereas we're in cycles. You can also see we've got the edge detection. It also works dynamically with other objects. And yeah, so let's hop right into it. Alright, so to start off, let's just make ourselves a simple background by grabbing 3 sides of this, just deleting the faces. And then for this, we're going to go over to Texture Paint, click New on the texture. Under the blank, we're going to grab a UV grid, click OK, and then we're going to go to Shading, snap over to it, and let's find the thing. Alright, and then in the basic color, we're just going to do Image Texture, and we're going to select our Untitled, plug it in, go to Material Preview, and we can see that we have a grid. Alright, let's go ahead, and just to make our job a little easier, we'll snap that up so the cursor's right in the center. You could also move the cursor down, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, we're going to get ourselves a UV sphere. I'm going to scale it down a bit so it's a nice reasonable size, and then we're going to subdivide it, and we're going to smooth the subdivision. And then we're going to shade smooth, and now let's create our material. So we're just going to delete the principled BSDF and get ourselves a refraction BSDF. We can start off just plugging that straight in. And now this is a little funky in Eevee, and we're going to end up using cycles, but let's see how far we can get with Eevee. And I can see it's kind of doing some funky refraction stuff. Anyway, so what we're going to do is for the main stringy part of it, we're going to create a Musgrave texture. And you can see that doesn't really look like what we're going for initially, but if we add a color ramp, add a 3rd pin, and then let's go ahead and clamp. Oh no, let's flip this actually. So yeah, we'll do white in the center, and then black on each edge. And if we pull this in on both sides, we'll kind of clamp it to one side, you can see that we kind of get that sort of stringy effect. So let's go ahead and pinch it nice and close. And if you want, you can change this to constant, and it'll give you a much sharper effect. I'm kind of a fan of the softer though, so we'll leave it at linear. You can also go B-spline if you want a little bit softer from this. So let's go ahead and give this some mapping coordinates, and then we're going to take the Musgrave texture, duplicate it, and plug it in again. And now for the second one, we're just going to give it something to make it a little different. So we're going to set the scale. Let's go ahead and mix these two together. Don't want to plug into that for now. Alright, so we can see them both. So we're going to change the scale. Let's actually pull it down, not up by a bit. And then we'll change the details, not super noticeable. So we'll just leave it mostly the same. It doesn't matter that much. And then for this, we actually want we don't need a second one of these, but we need a second mapping node for animation. So we'll go ahead and do that now. And now we've kind of got 2 sets. Let's go and switch them from 3D to 4D. So we can animate the W value. That means we'll just have something a little bit. We can change basically a seed value. Now let's set that from mix to add and turn it up to 1. So that way it just adds the light on top of that. And then we're going to go ahead and after it goes through there, we're going to clamp it just to make sure it doesn't get too crazy out of hand. And now we can delete these. No, whatever. Let's animate these next. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a timeline. I'm going to grab a timeline, one of these side ones, go to frame 0, give ourselves a little more room there. And then we're going to select this node. We're going to keyframe the location rotation on both of these, and then we're going to go ahead and also keyframe. We're going to go ahead and keyframe the W value as well. Then let's go ahead to the graph editor. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take these. You can also, if you want, keyframe the rotation, and if you want it spinning like around the z-axis, you can use the object coordinate instead. But we're just going to do this to keep it simple. So let's select. You need the node selected, and then we're going to hop over to the graph editor. Zoom in. We're going to switch it to a mode so we can see what we're doing. All right, and now we're going to down arrow here, here, and then we've got all of our different values. So let's not animate the z values. That's up and down. We want to just animate the x and the y's. So let's do the x on the first one. So we're going to do a generator, and then we're going to do some value that's pretty small, 0.05. This is the rate at which it animates. You can kind of, if you click space, you can see it. And then for this one, let's click on the y value to a generator and do like 0.002, something a little bit different. That's a little too small. We'll do 0.02. Might be a little fast. And then it's all just kind of tweaking values till you find something that you like. That's too fast again. Probably want that slower for later. So yeah, we'll go with that for now. And then we're going to go back over to a shading tab, and we're going to, let's go ahead and clamp these down just a little more. I want these to be a little bit thinner. Might be a little too much. I'll clamp down this one as well. Anyway, just dig it till you like it. And now what we're going to do, we're going to add another texture. So we're going to go ahead and add a noise texture, because we want to get some smaller values in between all of these. In the original, it actually came from the same texture as these lines, but because we're clamping them so hard, we kind of lose all of that detail. So we're just going to have to use our own new thing. So if we look at this, it's just kind of some basic noise, and we're going to add a color ramp. We just pinch it in just a little bit. Doesn't matter that much. We'll turn the scale to be a bit smaller as well. And then if you want, you can also clamp this down so it's much harsher, which might look good if you're going for a more sharp toonish effect, but I'm going to leave this a little bit softer. And now we're going to go ahead and mix it into the clamp, if we can. Yeah, we got it. All right, cool. Let's move these away a bit and use this one. Now you can see it's kind of mixing them all together. Let's go ahead and add or use an add for this as well. It also might get slightly different results if you switch the order. For this, I don't think it will really, but you never know. It's kind of something to play around with and keep in mind. I'll switch that back. And then I'm actually going to clamp this white in a little bit more as well. Alright, so now we've got ourselves kind of a basis. Let's also go ahead and animate just the, not the scale. Switch this to a 4D. That's 3D still, 4D. And animate the W on this as well. So that way it kind of evolves throughout the time that it is being used. So we're going to go ahead, I didn't select, there we go. Click on it, add a generator, do something small like 0.001. It's probably too small. Yep, that's definitely too small. 0.001. And you can see it kind of changes throughout. Let's go and actually speed that up just a little bit. It's really finicky. There's a very small difference between too fast and too slow with this. Alright, let's go for that. Now back over to shading. For the displacement, what it looked like he uses is basically some Voronoi textures. For he used two, I'm just going to use one just to keep it simple. So we're going to need a displacement node. We're going to plug that into displacement. And then grab this, pull it down here so we can see everything what we're doing. Let's give ourselves a little more room here so we can really see what we're doing. All right, and then we're going to add, not actually a color ramp this time. So we're just going to plug the height straight into that. And this is where we kind of have to switch over to cycles, because at this point, we've kind of, the displacement only works in cycles. Let's go ahead and turn on denoising. All right, so we also have to turn on the displacement in the settings. So go ahead and do that. I like displacement only. I found that gives slightly better results. Then we're going to need to turn the scale down some so it's a little bit more subtle. And then we're going to turn the scale on this up a fair bit. Yeah, like probably like between 10 and 15 somewhere, but as always, to your liking. All right, so now what we're going to do, let's just keep using this for now. We need to give this some way of animating it. For this, I'm actually gonna, so you can either animate the movement or the vector or both. It's up to you. But since we're going to need this somewhere else later as well, we need something to have the same exact displacement. It'll make more sense later. We're going to get a value node. I think actually for this, I'm just going to animate the evolution of it, just for simplicity's sake. So I'm going to turn it to 4D, and then we've got the little W value. So we're just going to add one of these, and we're going to plug this into the W value. Now for using this, what we're going to do, we're going to add a empty, just plain axis will work fine. We'll move it so we can kind of see it. And then we want to, frame 0, we want to animate the location. So we're going to go back to the graph editor, and then we're going to hit generator, and then we're going to give it some value that's relatively small. Maybe not quite that small. And it's gone. That'll work fine. So we're going to add another one on Y, and we're going to set that to a different number. Something similar, but a little bit different for variety's sake. 2. I think that'll work. All right. And now let's pop back over to the shading editor. Select that. Now what we're going to do, we're going to add a driver to this. We're going to select the empty as the object, and then we're going to leave it as X location. And now what that'll do is it'll turn this movement of this into a value we can use in any shader that we please. So let's go ahead and plug this into here. It'll probably be too dark for now, but we'll get to that later. Oh, speaking of dark, one other thing we want to do is we want to add a second sphere, shade smooth, scale it down pretty small, and add an emission shader to it. So we'll just do new, principled, change that to emission, and then turn it up to like, that'll work for now. Make it small enough that you can kind of see what you're doing beyond it. All right, that'll work for now. Now you can see we got a little bit of this kind of distortion, but we want if we want a little more, what we can do is add a bump node, and then we can plug the output of our Voronoi into the height. So it's the same thing that's going to our displacement, and plug the normal of that into the normal of the refraction. And you can see that's an extremely obvious effect, but we can turn that down some, and it just gives us a little more detail in the displacement. Now what we can do is we can, let's see, so we've animated that. Is that too much? If needed, you can go and change the graph values on the plane axis, but I think I'm going to leave it for now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to color it. So we're going to just take this, drag this over some, and we're going to add another color ramp to here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a two very, very light blues, and then we'll add a bit more of a dark blue later. So we'll just do something slightly different, maybe like an indigo. Pinch this in a bit, and I'm going to add a perfect white value right over here. So we keep our little stringies as light as we can. And now this is really subtle, so to help it be a little more obvious, what we're going to do, let me turn this down a little bit more still, is we're going to add an emission shader. And then we're going to mix that with our principled BSDF, or I'm sorry, our refraction BSDF. And we're going to get another color ramp, and we're going to plug that in between the add shader and our emission, sorry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get two much more contrasty colors. We're going to get a bit of a darker blue, maybe like that, and then we're going to get another light blue. And now what we can do is we can control the amount that this gets mixed in. It'll help lighten our effects up. And then what we can do is, if it's a little too strong, we can take another color ramp, plug that into the factor, plug this agitator into the input. Let's give it a flip. And now we can kind of control where the refraction shader does and doesn't control. So if we want, we can actually control it to not refract on these white lines by kind of clamping it around a bit. So do we actually want to do that or not? Yeah, it helps pop everything out a bit more. And now if you look at it, it's kind of messy, and that's because the backside is refracting stuff as well. And that's not necessarily bad. But for the sake of clarity and just so you know that this is possible, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So we're just going to get a transparent shader, and we're going to mix that in with this. And basically what we're doing is we're calling the back faces, but we need it to be a little more clear. So we're just going to get a geometry node, and we're going to plug the back facing into the factor. All right, and I can see we can only see the back face, so we actually need to flip this. So there's just a node that we can use called invert, an invert node, and plug that in, and now we've just got our front faces. This is less realistic, but it can look a little nicer, so take your pick on that one. And a lot of this just comes down to the actual look of it. Comes down to just forever tweaking some of these shaders, and some bits you can choose what bits you do and don't want. Oh, we didn't actually change the color of this. Let's give it a bit more of a saturated blue. And we can tweak the emission shader to be a bit brighter. Can help brighten it some. And then another thing we can do is actually, so we can get a layer weight with a color ramp, do facing, and then mix another emission shader in. Just leave this one as white, and we're going to mix that with our previous mix shader. And then we can clamp down the dark values on this, bring up the white ones a fair bit. Give us just a bit of the edge effect kind of thing. And then we can, oh wait, actually no, let's plug this into the factor, not into the shader itself. So you can clamp that in a bit and get it about as sharp as you want it. Again, you can also use different modes to sharpen it a little bit more, and then we can turn up the amount, and we can see it becomes much more apparent. All right, so now let's go ahead and switch to edge detection. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. One of them is using a dynamic paint. But that, I don't know, I tried it and it ran into some other issues, although I might in a later tutorial go over how to do that with a different effect. But for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to use something called weight proximity. So essentially it detects the distance between two objects, and then we can use that as a vertex group to do some other effects. So how we're going to do this is we're going to just hit tab, and we're going to duplicate it, scale it up just a tiny little bit in edit mode, duplicate all the vertices in edit mode, and scale it up a little bit. So now what we have is two spheres, one of them slightly bigger than the other. And then while this is still selected, we're going to hop down to vertex groups. We're going to hit plus, and we're going to click assign. So now the outside sphere has a vertex group. And we can use that to either include it or exclude it from different effects. The final thing we're going to do is go into edit mode, or I'm sorry, down to materials, add a material, click new, and make it an emission shader as well. We can just leave it as the plain white, will work for now. And then click assign. And now you can see we have a white sphere outside of our effect. So we're going to hop back over to modifiers. Come on. Oh, we did add one. And we're going to add a vertex weight proximity. We're going to add a mask modifier, and then, yeah, we'll stick with that for now. So for the vertex group, let's just select group. For the target object, we're going to select the floor. And then for the mask, we're going to select group as well. And now you kind of just have to tweak the things till it ends up working. So we're also going to select group in here, and we're going to flip it. So that way we're excluding the interior sphere. Let's just make sure I did that right. Flip that group. Don't flip that group. All right. So now we can see that this is removing and adding the exterior sphere. We're going to switch this from object to geometry, click face, and then we're going to bring the value down a fair bit. Oh, that's kind of working. Kind of see it there a bit. So if we don't flip this, you can kind of see it's removing that. So we basically just need to invert this, so it's keeping it instead of removing it, by way of pressing random buttons till it works. Oh, there we go. It's a little bit. All right. So it's all a matter of kind of tweaking it till it works. So that went back up again. There we go. And now what you can do, if you move it against another wall, you can kind of see it sort of dynamically affects. Let's also turn the small sphere. We're just going to click on the big, shift click on the big one, click Control P, and then click Object. So it parents it. Now if we move the big sphere around, it'll take the little one with it. If we move it over a wall, we can kind of see that it's sort of doing the edge detect thing we're looking for. So let's go down to materials and make this glow a little brighter to make it more obvious. But if you look close, you can tell that it's really jagged and not very smooth. So what we're going to do is go back to modifiers and add a smooth modifier. And then in this, we need to select the group vertex as well. That way it doesn't smooth the underlying sphere. And then we're going to turn the iterations to like 10-ish. And then turn the factor up until it either is as smooth as you like it or until it just before it breaks. And then a combination of all these different dials can get us what we're looking for. And now you can see we've kind of got this edge detection effect. And now it works pretty well, but it does have a couple limitations. So one of them, keep undoing this. One of them is that if you move it up, you can kind of see it's a little bit stuttered. Now a lot of that can be helped if you just add more vertices. And the other limitation to it is if we Control A, add a new mesh, so a sphere or whatever. So this is if we want to collide it with an external object. You can see it's not doing anything. What we can do is just combine the object of the sphere and the background. And now you can see it is affecting it, but it's no longer a second object. So if we move around, you kind of move everything, or you can move in edit mode. And you can see this does actually work quite dynamically. Now one way around this is to actually add a hook modifier to this object. So we'll add let's find it, hook modifier, leave edit mode, no, actually in edit mode, hit Control S, and then cursor just selected, or Shift S, sorry. And then let's add outside of edit mode, add an empty, whichever kind of empty you prefer, it doesn't really matter that much. And then back on this, select the object for the empty, or select the object for the hook, the empty, and then let's actually create a vertex group of this object, assign it, and then we can select that vertex group as our group. And now if you see, we're not inside edit mode, and we can move around just this sphere on its own. And you can see that still also works. And that does work fine. The issue is if you have a ton of objects you want it to collide with, you kind of have to pick and choose what you want. You can do that as many times as you want. I don't know, after a while it might start slowing it down, but I did test it with at least 2, and I know you can get 2 objects to work, or 3 technically, because the background and 2 spheres. But that's kind of how you have to work around it. So that's one limitation. The reason I'm using this instead of dynamic paint is because I found dynamic paint to be it didn't update as well, and it was a lot more finicky to work with. But really, either way can work. It just depends what you need. All right, so now that we've got all that working, you can notice something. Or if you zoom in, our edge isn't actually distorting with the rest of it. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to go to our main object material, material 1, woo, and then we're going to select everything that we're using in our displacement tree. Hit Control C, go down to the second material. We're going to hit Control V here. Go ahead and move it up, and then we're going to plug this into displacement. And it did lose our driver, so we're just going to go back to the first one, wherever it went. There we go. We're going to hit copy driver, go back to our second material, find it again, and then click paste driver. Let's go and shrink this down again. And now, if we play it, you can kind of tell. Oh, we didn't turn displacement on. So you also have to turn displacement on, and now you can see it's actually moving with the rest of it. And here you can kind of tweak the size a bit. You can kind of maybe shrink it down a bit, so it's just ever so slightly bigger. Or you can make it a lot bigger. It's up to you. Go and raise this up a little more so it's not clipping. And now you can see we've kind of got most of the effect. There's one more thing I'm going to do is, well, it's not really an issue, but you can kind of see it's kind of jagged back here. And that's the back side of this material here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do the same thing we did earlier, where we mix in and transparent BSDF. We just mix it with this, and then in the factor slot we're going to get a geometry node, and we're going to plug the back facing straight into factor. And now we can see it looks like it's backwards, so we're just going to go ahead and get our invert again. Plug that in, and there. Now you can see it kind of got rid of that really weird sort of mess in the background, which you can leave if you want, but again, can just help the effect be a little bit cleaner. All right, so if we hit play, we can kind of see it's doing all the different things that we need. We've got the displacement, we've got our effect things going around. It's got edge detection, we can kind of move around. It also if we kind of pan around, we can tell that the Fresnel we did with the layer weight is also kind of working no matter which angle we look at it from. Now this does have the underside as well. You can remove that. I don't think it's really necessary because it's not that many objects, so it kind of works fine, and it also makes it so you can kind of choose how big you want it to be. Another thing to note is that with the mask modifier, the extra vertices that are hidden don't seem to count toward the vertex limit. So if we look at the faces, it's 3,260, and if we remove the sphere, I imagine that will go down. Well, faces. I mean, the number does change as it changes. I don't know if it goes down. So something to note is there will be more rendered faces the more objects you have colliding with it, or the more area they're taking up. And I think that is pretty much it. You can also move this around, and it'll still all update. So thank you very much for watching the video. Make sure to go ahead and check out the original creator of this effect in Unity. Link in the description once again. All right, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching. See ya.